A millennium, millennia, is a period of time, equal to 1000 years, from Latin mil, thousand, and annum, year. The term may implicitly refer to calendar millennia, periods tied numerically to a particular dating system, specifically ones that begin at the starting, initial reference, point of the calendar in question, typically the year 0 or the year 1, or in later years which are whole number multiples of 1000 years after it. This concept is the one primarily discussed in this article. The term can also refer to an interval of time beginning on any date. Frequently in the latter case, and sometimes also in the former, it may have religious or theological implications, see millenarianism. Especially in religious usage, such an interval may be interpreted less precisely, being not necessarily exactly 1000 years long. Millennium, a period of 1000 years. The Gregorian calendar, put forth in 1582 and subsequently adopted by most countries, did not include a year 0 in the transition from BC, years before Christ, to add, those since his birth. Thus, the first millennium is defined as spanning years 1 to 1000 and the second the years 1001 to 2000. Although numerous popular celebrations marked the start of the year 2000, the 21st century and third millennium ad began on January 1, 2001. A millennium, millennia or millenniums, is a period of 1000 years, 100 decades, or 10 centuries, sometimes called a kiloannum, ka, or kiloyear, ky. Normally, the word is used specifically for periods of 1000 years that begin at the starting point, initial reference point, of the calendar in consideration and at later years that are whole number multiples of 1000 years after the start point. The term can also refer to an interval of time beginning on any date. Millennia sometimes have religious or theological implications, see millenarianism. The word millennium derives from the Latin mil, thousand, and annus, year. Debate over millennium celebrations. There was a public debate leading up to the celebrations of the year 2000 as to whether the beginning of that year should be understood as the beginning of the new millennium. Historically, there has been debate around the turn of previous decades, centuries, and millennia, but not so much for decades. The issue arises from the difference between the convention of using ordinal numbers to count years and millennia, as in the third millennium, or using a vernacular description, as in the 2000s. The difference of opinion comes down to whether to celebrate, respectively, the end or the beginning of the -000 year. The first convention is common in English-speaking countries, but the latter is favored in, for example, Sweden, Tivitacentelet, which translates literally as the 2000s period. Those holding that the arrival of the new millennium should be celebrated in the transition from 2000 to 2001, i.e., December 31, 2000, to January 1, 2001, argued that the Anno Domini system of counting years began with the year 1, there was no year 0, and therefore the first millennium was from the year 1 to the end of the year 1000, the second millennium from 1001 to the end of 2000, and the third millennium beginning with 2001 and ending at the end of 3000. Similarly, the first millennium BC was from the year 1000 BC to the end of the year 1 BC. Popular culture supported celebrating the arrival of the new millennium in the transition from 1999 to 2000, i.e., December 31, 1999, to January 1, 2000, in that the change of the hundreds digit in the year number, with the zeros rolling over, is consistent with the vernacular demarcation of decades by their tens digit, e.g. naming the period 1980 to 1989 as the 1980s or the 80s. This has been described as the odometer effect. Also, the year 2000 had been a popular phrase referring to an often utopian future, or a year when stories in such a future were set. There was also media and public interest in the Y2K computer bug. A third position was expressed by Bill Popp, honorary consul for Kiribati. To me, I just don't see what all the hoopla is about, it's not going to change anything. The next day the sun is going to come up again and then it will all be forgotten. Even for those who did celebrate, in astronomical terms, there was nothing special about this particular event. Stephen Jay Gould, in his essay Dowsing Diminutive Dennis Debate, or DDDD equals 2000, discussed the high versus pop culture interpretation of the transition. Gould noted that the high culture, strict construction had been the dominant viewpoint at the 20th century's beginning, but that the pop culture viewpoint dominated at its end. The start of the 21st century and third millennium was celebrated worldwide at the start of the year 2000. 1 year later, at the start of the year 2001, the celebrations had largely returned to the usual ringing in of just another new year, although some welcomed the real millennium, including America's official timekeeper, the U.S. Naval Observatory, as well as Cuba and Japan. The popular approach was to treat the end of 1999 as the end of a millennium and to hold millennium celebrations at midnight between December 31, 1999, and January 1, 2000, with the cultural and psychological significance of the events listed above combining to cause celebrations to be observed 1 year earlier than the formal date. Turn of the millennium refers to the change from one millennium to another. Example: many people celebrated the turn of the millennium with fireworks and parties. A millennium of progress indicates a long period of continuous improvement or development. Example: the city saw a millennium of progress in technology and education. Usage examples. Example 1, the year 2000 marked the beginning of a new millennium. Example 2, the ancient writings spoke of events that took place over a millennium ago. Example 3, celebrations were held worldwide to commemorate the end of the second millennium. Fun fact: the term millennium comes from the Latin word mil, which means thousand, and annus, which means year. It has been in use for over 500 years. A millennium, plural, millenniums or millennia, is a measure of time. One millennium spans a period of 1,000 years. A millennium can refer to any period of 1,000 years. In the Gregorian calendar, the most widely used calendar in the world, the first millennium started in the year 1 and ended in the year 1000. The second millennium started in the year 1001 and ended in the year 2000. Currently, based on the Gregorian calendar, we are in the third millennium, which will last long past the end of our lives up until the year 3000. A millennium is a larger span of time than people can really relate to. Below are some conversions of a millennium to other commonly used measurements of time. 1 millennium equals 10 centuries. 1 millennium equals 12,000 months. 1 millennium equals 365,250 days. 1 millennium equals 8,766,000 hours. 1 millennium equals 525,960,000 minutes. The arrival of the new millennium has sparked a great debate: when does it actually begin? Our instincts told us to celebrate on December 31, 1999. But logic says that every millennium is made up of 1,000 years, which means that the year 2000 belongs to the second, not the third. Credit for this confusing state of affairs goes to Denis the Diminutive, a 6th century monk who prepared a calendar for Pope St. John I. Instead of beginning his calendar at year 0, Denis started with 1 AD. Bequeathing us the chronological quandary we face today. So what is the answer? According to the U.S. Naval Observatory, the third millennium begins on January 1, 2001. Even so, most Americans and much of the world focused on the flip of the calendar from 99 to 2000. White House millennium programs began in 1997 and will run through January 1, 2001. Greeting a new millennium is a once-in-a-thousand years experience. Let's make the celebration last. Time in history, years, decades, etc. What is a year? Looking at a calendar will tell you that a year is something that lasts from January 1 to December 31. But what is a year other than what you see on a piece of paper? It is the length of time it takes the Earth to orbit the Sun one time. It takes 365.24 days. For this reason, every 4 years we have a leap year. In leap years, we add an extra date to the calendar, meaning that every 4 years February has an extra day. Year terms. A year is 1 unit. Here are some terms we use to describe multiple years. Decade, a period of 10 years. Century, a period of 100 years. Millennium, a period of 1000 years. What is a century? A century is a period of 100 years. We are currently in the 21st century, meaning we are in the years beginning with 2000. This can be a little bit confusing. Just remember, the years we are in is always one behind the century number, because it takes 100 years to complete a century. This explains why the 19th century is considered the 1800s, why the 16th century covers the 1500s, etc. What is BC and AD? In the modern calendar, we label all years with BC. Before Christ, or AD. Anno Domini, or in the year of our Lord. There is no 0 year, in this system. The year Christ was born is 1 AD, and the year preceding it is 1 BC. With this in mind, the year 200 AD was 100 years after 100 AD, and 200 BC was 100 years before 100 BC. There was around 399 to be exact, years between 200 BC and 200 AD. Years in the most popular calendar used today, the Gregorian calendar, are counted from the year A.D.1. There was no year 0. Before A.D.1 came the year B.C.1. Thus, the first century ran for 100 years from A.D.1 until the end of AD 100, the first millennium, from A.D.1 until the end of AD 1000, and so the current millennium will not end until December 31st, AD 2000. Calendar system, year. Gregorian, 2000. Byzantine, 7508. Chinese, 4636. Indian, 1921. Islamic, 1420. Jewish, 5760. A 6th century scholar, Dionysius Exiguus, Denis the Short, established the Gregorian calendar in AD 532 by fixing AD Anno Domini 1 as the time of Jesus Christ's birth. In Dionysius' time, the notion of counting from 0 had not yet been introduced to Europe from the Middle East. Jesus Christ was more likely born in BC 6, but Dionysius' system has held firm throughout the years. There are, however, some 40 other calendar systems in use, all of which are in different years that change on different dates. Officially, the new millennium will begin at 0 hour, Greenwich Mean Time, GMT, also referred to as Coordinated Universal Time, UTC, on January 1, 2001, according to rules adopted at an international conference held in October 1884. But that same conference also decided that this reckoning shall not interfere with the use of local or other standard time where desirable. In other words, everyone east of Greenwich will not postpone their parties past midnight local time, and everyone west won't celebrate early. The year 2000 is special even though it isn't the start of the 21st century because it is a leap year. Julius Caesar devised the leap year to correct for the fact that the Earth circles the Sun in 352.24219 days. Because this is not a whole number, the months of the year would slowly fall out of sync with the seasons. A fairly precise correction to the Gregorian calendar debuted in 1582, and stated that a century year will only be a leap year if it is evenly divisible by 400, which is true for Y2K. The inexorable mathematical logic is that the official calendar millennium does not start until the year 2001. The first 2000 years end with the year 2000, and the next 1000 start with 2001, the first year of the third millennium. Imagine a vast army of soldiers, with 1,000 men in each row. In the first row are soldiers 1 to 1,000, in the second, 1,001 to 2,000, and in the third, 2,001 to 3,000. The third row starts with soldier 2,001. Or suppose you work 1,000 hours a year. The first year, you work hours 1 to 1,000, the second year hours 1,001 to 2,000, and the third year begins with your 2,001st hour of work. So we should definitely celebrate the official calendar millennium on January 1st, 2001. But there is another millennium to celebrate, the millennium of the 2000s, the years that begin with the 2. This change will affect every check we write, every letter we date. It is exciting to see all the digits roll over for the first time since the year advanced from 999 to 1000, when Ethelred II was King of England, as exciting as seeing the odometer in my Ferrari roll over from 99,999 to 100,000, or seeing the whole Senate roll over to 100 new senators, which probably never will happen, but then again, I don't really have a Ferrari either. Of course, this change in date is what causes the Y2K problems with computers, which will interpret 2000 as 1900 instead of 2000. So maybe it's safer to wait until the official 2001 to celebrate. Another question remains, where on earth should the celebration begin? You may have seen on TV on New Year's Eve the earlier celebration of the New Year in other time zones. The most common answer is Greenwich, England, on the prime meridian, the starting place of all time zones. Indeed, a plaque on the Greenwich Old Royal Observatory announces the millennium starts here. But that is not the final word. The year 2001, heralding the third millennium, will arrive earlier in England than in America, but it will arrive still earlier farther east in Moscow, still earlier in Japan. That is why it is called the land of the rising sun, and so on until you hit the international date line and drop back to the previous day. In fact, Fiji is right up against the 180-degree meridian of longitude. But that is not the final word either. The dateline has long had an eastward bulge beyond the 180-degree line, including the South Pacific island of Tonga, situated in a later time zone. But Kiribati, a widespread island nation split by the dateline, with a different date in each half, has announced a spectacular relocation of the dateline eastward around their boundary. Now Kiribati's Christmas Island will see the new millennium an hour before Tonga. Personally, I hope to go to bed early and find a new millennium waiting for me when I awake. Thank you for watching this video.